Today I'm here to do a spoiler-free review of The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, the new book that is just coming out by the same authors who wrote the Expanse series. For context, I'm someone who adores that series. While I do think it has its flaws and imperfections, it's the series that got me into reading adult space opera, and I've been very excited, very much anticipating this new release by them that is a separate standalone series that definitely can be read before The Expanse if you want to start here. And I'm going to tell you all more about that, starting with a brief synopsis. So I always like to keep it minimal when it comes to plot because half the enjoyment of a series is enjoying and finding out everything along the way. In this one, we follow a young academic who is working in a scholarly field. He has some potential romance and interest, and then the story, without giving away too much, starts off with this alien presence coming to the planet where humanity now resides. And again, the story goes from there, and I'll leave the plot synopsis at that point. Other reviewers might say more. The back of the book technically says more, but I think it's more about knowing my reaction, whether or not you want to pick up this book if it sounds up your alley. Now, I think the big question everyone wants to know is how this series compares to The Expanse, and I will say that if you are someone who really likes the writing of James S.A. Corey as a duo, I think you'll find very similar writing here. There were certain parts, especially around the beginning, where they had some descriptions that very much felt reminiscent of the original series, and I really like that here. Again, to be clear, this series is not connected. You could argue or speculate that it could be set in the same world or imagined future as The Expanse in a different place and time, but that is a really loose thread, and again, neither series will spoil the other because it follows completely different characters. It is completely separate, and you really don't know why humanity is where they are in the start of this one. And so with the premise of this one, the start I actually thought was quite strong. It had a lot of potential, and as the story progressed into the later sections, this is where my enjoyment of this series, or at least the start of this series, went downhill. And that is the fact that this one quickly progressed, again without getting to plot points, into a very traditional action-packed thriller science fiction journey. And so unlike The Expanse, which hence the title of the series, gets larger in scope with each book, there's a lot of political maneuvering and different groups, and everyone has their own desires and opportunities and motivations, and you get to really see the big picture as the series expands. Instead, with this one, what we have is a very intimate story of this young individual and their group of friends. And this group of friends, to start with, already feel very young. This is a series that is marketed as being for adults, but within the beginning of the story, there's a focus on a romance. There is a kiss, there is a conversation of crushes, which just felt very, very young to someone like myself who is well into adulthood and don't even talk about relationships in those terms anymore. And so I just found this book to be surprisingly easy in terms of being a YA crossover, not something I'm looking for. I want that maturity, and while the actual plot of the story does lean more into adult themes, the themes it leans into are very tropey in nature. And so if you read other science fiction, or even if you watch other science fiction like Star Trek, you will see certain threads of the aliens, of the plot points that you will have seen again and again. And I think that the authors do these plot points fine, but if they're not doing anything new, anything special, I think that this book will most appeal to those that don't normally read science fiction, because I think it's easy to fall into, it's easy to follow along the plot and fly through the story because it is very fast paced, but in terms of the elements I'm looking for, I never found the world to be that fascinating. Again, we have such a close perspective on it that I never really felt like I understood or got the opportunity to understand the larger world around it. And again, for me, the appeal of The Expanse was always in the world building, the alien technology, and all the pieces coming together. And in this one, it just felt like a group of young kids running around, and it just felt very narrow in scope, very limited, and not the parts of science fiction that I am personally drawn towards. Again, this may work better for other readers depending on what you seek from the genre. So all that being said, I had a very mediocre time with this first book. I'm still intrigued as a reviewer to continue on with the series should I get the opportunity from the publisher. But in terms of this first book, I think that it really missed the mark, or at least did not live up to my expectations of what I came to hope for from the author authors of The Expanse. If I was reviewing this first book without the anticipation of this particular author, or particular duo of authors rather, I think that I would have perhaps been a bit more kind on this one. I will say that the writing is good, the characters are fine, the plotting is fine. It is an average book that will receive an average rating for me on Goodreads at Amazon. And overall, I think that it is a satisfactory, if not particularly special, science fiction book, which again is fine, but I don't want to tell you that this book is just fine. I don't want people rushing out based off my recommendation to get a book that I don't think is anything you haven't seen before if you're already immersed in this genre. So I recognize that this is going to be an unpopular opinion. I can already see the early reviews coming in for this book, and they are all flying 5 stars. So I wanted to put this out there because I seem to love being the unpopular opinion. I'm not here to be controversial, but I am a harsh critic, and I do think that a lot of other reviewers are perhaps having a different experience with this book, quite frankly, than I am, because I'm not seeing what they're seeing. And hopefully the fault is on me, because I do encourage you to try this book for yourself if you have an opportunity to, if you are intrigued enough and love The Expanse enough to want to see what the authors do next. But I will caution you that based off my experience, I found this book to be a lot more average than I expected. It hasn't left me thinking about it. It was hard to put together this review in general. I thought I was going to do a long 15-minute dissection of this book, and honestly, I don't have that much to say about it because it hasn't left much of an impression on me. And most of what I have to say here is really comparing it to a series that I already love and wanting to give everyone the right expectations as they go into it. So that is it for this video here. I've had a lot of requests to do more individual review content, so that is what I'm trying to bring you with some of these smaller bonus videos. So let me know if you enjoyed it with a thumbs up, a comment down below, and if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel. I do read and review a lot of science fiction, and especially if you're interested in finding out what new releases are worth your time and money, whether you get them from the library or choose to buy or pre-order something, I like to help with that based off the fact that I do often get these early release copies. And if you love science fiction as much as I do, I'd love to hear your comments, feedback down below, especially once you've had a chance to read this book. I'd love to know what other people think, because I do think my opinion is going to be a little bit unpopular, but especially if you agree with me, I'd love to have some confirmation bias in the comments below. All that being said, talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.